Identity theft is no joke. In the UK, crimes involving identity fraud can be punishable with 6 months of community service all the way up to 15 years of prison time. For a person, identity theft can have some serious repercussions. For a steam engine, however, it seems that identity theft is much easier to get away with, as one famous locomotive has proven. In 1930, upon a visit to America and discussion with various American businessmen, the chairman of London, Midland and Scottish Railways decided to send one of their engines to the Century of Progress International Exposition in Chicago to help bolster British and US relations. In 1933, the year of the exposition, the company decided to send one of their new Royal Scot locomotives, as they'd proved to not only be fast but reliable performers on the express run between England and Scotland. To ensure that the engine wouldn't break down during its time overseas, a freshly overhauled Scot was chosen, this being number 6152, the Kings Dragoon Guardsman. Being built in 1930 with the later batch of Royal Scots, 6152 would have been in better mechanical condition than its 1927 built counterparts, and having just been serviced, it was in the right place at the right time to be selected for the American trip. For the sake of presentation, 6152 had its name and numbers swapped with number 6100, the original Royal Scot aptly named Royal Scot. Being fitted with a bell, powerful headlamp, new axle boxes and a modified front bogie, the new Royal Scot was loaded onto a ship along with 8 different carriages to represent the rolling stock used along the LMS, these being a third-class corridor brake, third-class vestibule, electric kitchen car, first-class corridor vestibule, first-class lounge car, third-class sleeping car, first-class sleeping car and a first-class corridor brake. The original Royal Scot remained at home, now assuming King Dragoon Guardsman's name and number. The new Royal Scot's tour of America was a resounding success. Arriving in Montreal, it managed to hit speeds of up to 75 miles an hour on its initial test run on Canadian rails. It then travelled to Ottawa, Niagara Falls, New York, Hamilton and Cincinnati before finally arriving in Chicago. The spectacle of seeing a British engine running on American and Canadian rails drew thousands of spectators. So vast were the crowds gathered besides the line to watch it go by that the driver had to slow the train down to 15 miles an hour for fear he'd run over some of the spectators who were getting too close to the rails. Once in Chicago, Royal Scot settled down for its 5-month display, becoming one of the most popular exhibits on show. By the end of the exhibition, over 2 million people had seen the engine, with multiple other states showing interest in having it visit. The original plan was for Royal Scot to come straight home once the show was over, but after its unexpected popularity, the LMS agreed to have the engine tour around the rest of America and Canada. Leaving Chicago in October, it travelled south and west, visiting Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, Utah, Nevada and California before heading north through Oregon and Washington into Canada. Through Canada, Royal Scot travelled east before re-entering America. There it toured around the northeast states of the US and southeastern provinces of Canada before finally ending its tour where it began in Montreal, having not broken down once during the entire trip. Not only did Royal Scot travel an impressive distance, but also successfully tackled conditions it was not built for, from a blazing heat of 110 degrees Fahrenheit in Las Vegas to 8 degrees Fahrenheit in Montreal. When traversing the Colorado mountains, it managed to climb an average grade of 1 in 67 for 25 miles, pulling all 8 of its coaches without the aid of a pilot or banking engine. Not only was this grade far steeper than any it'd have to climb on the route between London and Glasgow, but it traversed it better than most American engines built specifically for the job. It also continued to pull crowds of spectators wherever it went. In Los Angeles, countless celebrities visited the engine and some even had a breakfast party on board. Many stations along the route were so crowded that police had to turn thousands of people away even on rainy days, and when Royal Scot travelled through Revelstoke in British Columbia on a Sunday, the time of the local church service was altered so that people had the chance to see it pass by. Having made its mark on the North American continent and been seen by over 3 million people, Royal Scot returned home to Britain, where it was given special commemorative nameplates to mark the occasion. With the exposition over, you'd think that Royal Scot and Kings Dragoon Guardsman would swap names and numbers again, but no. 6152 continued to keep Royal Scot's name and numbers, while 6100 lost its place as the first engine of the class. Both engines eventually settled back into their regular lives, working expresses up and down the country. By the 1950s, both had been rebuilt with new boilers and were under the ownership of British Railways. The new Royal Scot continued to be somewhat of a celebrity among railway enthusiasts, so when it was the first of the class to be withdrawn from service in 1962, it was quickly preserved by Billy Butlin, who put it on display at his holiday park in Skegness. To commemorate the occasion, Butlin had the engine delivered with a fanfare of drums and bagpipes played by the 1st Battalion Royal Scots. Meanwhile, in 1965, Kings Dragoon Guardsman, the original Royal Scot, was withdrawn from service and scrapped with little mourning. Royal Scot had a relatively peaceful time at Butlin's, but by 1970 there was a great interest in running the engine again, and in 1971 it was moved to the Bressingham Steam Museum, where it was restored to working order and ran until 1978, when it became a static exhibit once more. After a long slow repair, it was finally back in working order in 2009, just in time to appear at a steam gala at the West Somerset Railway. In March that year, as it was being transported to the gala on the back of a lorry, the trailer caught fire. Luckily, it was put out before any damage was done to the engine, but it seems like that was a bad omen for things to come. After a poor performance at the West Somerset Railway, it then went to the Llangollen Railway for another event, only for the engine crew to find that Royal Scot had been shoddily repaired. Not only were some of the older parts in bad condition, but many of the new parts installed during the previous overhaul were fitted incorrectly. Eventually, Royal Scot came under the ownership of the Royal Scot Locomotive and General Trust, who took it out of service and gave it an extensive and thorough overhaul. Finally, in 2015, it was back in proper working order and has since become a common sight pulling rail tours up and down the country, and at the time this video comes out is currently awaiting overhaul. The question remains though, is it fair to still call this engine Royal Scot? The original Royal Scot was scrapped long ago, so it's not like the name will be conflicting with any other engines if they changed it back to the Kings Dragoon Guardsman. But honestly, I don't think it matters. Both Royal Scot and Kings Dragoon Guardsman were built to the same specifications. The only real difference is that one was built 3 years after the other. And when you consider the new Royal Scot's career as not just a reliable and revolutionary express machine for the LMS, but also an engine that successfully traversed North America without fault, still makes the engine worth remembering for its achievements alone. If anything, I'd say it's earned the right to bear the name it has. The Royal Scot class was a game changer for the LMS, but as for the engine, whether it should keep its name or not is still somewhat of a debate in railway circles. But regardless of what you think it should be called, be it the Kings Dragoon Guardsman or Royal Scot, let it be a reminder that, at the end of the day, your name isn't what you'll be remembered for, but what you've achieved. Subscribe for more.